Welcome to Hands Only CPR training. This class will teach you how to be a hero by administering Hands Only CPR and using an Automated External Defibrillator. There is a difference between mouth-to-mouth CPR and Hands Only CPR. Mouth-to-mouth CPR is the traditional form of CPR where we administer 30 compressions and 2 breaths over and over. We use this type of CPR for respiratory events, which means the person has stopped breathing first. Think drowning, choking, drug overdose, emergencies that start with the lungs. You can hold your breath, but your heart continues to beat. Eventually, the brain says, there's something wrong, either start breathing or I am going to start shutting things down. In that case, the heart has moved all of the oxygenated blood through the system to feed the brain. When the oxygen has been used up, we must put the oxygen back into the system to keep the brain alive. That means 30 compressions, 2 breaths over and over again. Mouth-to-mouth CPR is for respiratory events. You stop breathing first. Hands-only CPR is for cardiac events, which means the problem starts with the heart. There are 2 types of cardiac events. One is a heart attack. A person can be having a heart attack but can still talk to you. They usually complain that they don't feel well. The back, the stomach, or the jaw may hurt. It's not always a clutching of the chest or left arm that will give you the clue. Because the person can talk to you, you would not need to start compressions yet. The 911 system needs to be activated to get the emergency responders on the way, but you don't have to do much more for the person at this time. A heart attack is like a plumbing issue. The heart is working, it's just working hard to push blood through the clogged pipes. The second type of cardiac event is a sudden cardiac arrest. It is like an electrical issue. The person can be talking to you, having a great time, and then they collapse. Someone metaphorically turned the lights out on them. In that case, we take 3 steps to save their life. The first step is to call 911, get the emergency responders on the way. The second step is to administer hands-only CPR. The third step, if it is available, is to use an Automated External Defibrillator or AED. Think of the AED as the cherry on top. If you can send someone to get an AED, that's great, use it. But if it is just you and the patient, don't run around trying to get an AED. It is more important that you start compressions. We must keep the brain alive, and moving the blood with compressions will help do that. Hands-only CPR was developed because the medical community knew the rate of cardiac arrest deaths were too high. When bystander CPR is administered, the person's chance of survival goes up. But in many cases, no one was doing CPR. The doctors started asking people, what is your barrier to doing CPR? What would keep you from helping someone in this situation? There were 2 reasons that kept coming up. First, they were afraid of doing it wrong. If you have ever taken a full CPR class, you know there is a lot to remember. They ask you to check for a pulse, but under stress, can you tell if it's your pulse or their pulse you're feeling? They were very specific about where to push on the chest. You have to do the head tilt chin lift so you can get oxygen into the blood and not into the stomach. And what was the compression to breath ratio? Because it's changed over the years. People were afraid of doing it wrong. They didn't want to get into trouble. They didn't want to hurt the person, and most certainly didn't want to get sued. By the way, you are covered by the Good Samaritan law. If you are performing CPR to the best of your knowledge and training, you are covered. The second reason people were choosing not to help in cardiac arrest was that they didn't want to put their mouths on the injured person. They didn't want to put themselves at risk for disease. The docs had research that found when you go down in cardiac arrest, you have about 10 minutes of oxygen still in your system. The food that the brain needs is sitting there waiting to be moved. There isn't any reason for compressions to stop to put breaths in. They knew they needed to make it easy. Train people to aim for the center of the chest and push. We started teaching this as a national standard about 15 years ago. More people were trained, more people are helping in these situations, and more people are now surviving cardiac arrest. And when you think about the fact that you could save someone you really care about, your family and friends, that is a pretty awesome tool to have in your toolbox. Here is the most important reason you should know how to do hands-on only CPR. If you do nothing for that person in cardiac arrest but call 911 and wait for the emergency responders to arrive, that person's chance of survival is going down 10% for every minute that passes. The average response time for firefighters is about 5 minutes. That means the person's chance of survival is about 50%. Not great. You add CPR, it goes up to 80% chance of survival, and even more when you use an AED with compressions. Clearly, we can't save everyone, but giving that person a chance to go home to their families versus the alternative is a pretty terrific superpower. Now, how do we do this? The first step is to call 911. We use this system to get immediate response from police and fire. We always underscore this because people often call 911 for non-emergency reasons. You want to make sure you are using the system appropriately. When you call 911, the dispatchers are going to ask you many questions. However, there are 3 key pieces of information they will need. The first is they need to know where the emergency is. They ask where almost immediately because we are usually calling from cell phones and they need to start identifying the closest units to you. Be as specific as you can. If you don't know the address, give them landmarks and cross streets. If you are somewhere like an apartment community and the incident is at the pool, tell them that too. Firefighters need to park as closely as they can to the incident so they have fast access to their equipment. The dispatchers will confirm the phone number from which you are calling. They want to make sure that if you get disconnected or hang up, they can call you back. And thirdly, they want to know the type of emergency. When you call 911, you will get the police department or sheriff's department first. As soon as you identify that it's not bullets and bad guys that are the problem, they will transfer you to the fire department. In our area, that goes to Phoenix Fire Department. They dispatch for about 28 cities in our area as part of the automatic aid system. We don't care the color of the truck or the name on the back of the shirt. We know that we have to get to you fast because it's literally a matter of life and death. The closest unit will come to you. The questions will also help dispatchers send all of the right people to you. If it's a mountain rescue, you will get a technical rescue unit. If it's a gas leak, you'll get 2 hazmat teams. If it's a fire, you get at least 3 engines and a ladder truck. Try to stay calm and answer the dispatcher's questions as thoroughly as you can so you can get the help you need. Step 1 is calling 911. Step 2 is administering Hands Only CPR. We use this technique when the person is at least 8 years old. The guideline is there because most kids under the age of 8 suffer from respiratory event rather than a cardiac event. Remember, we do mouth-to-mouth CPR for respiratory events, and the compression-to-breath ratio is 30 compressions to 2 breaths. So, we think the person is at least 8 years old, and we know they are unresponsive. How do we know they are unresponsive? If you recall, checking for a pulse isn't always accurate. Instead, we do what's called a sternal rub. The sternum is the long flat bone located in the central part of the chest. To do a sternal rub, take your knuckles and rub really hard on the sternum. It hurts. A person who is merely unconscious is going to show some kind of life. They are going to moan, groan, move, maybe push you away. A person in a coma will have a pain response to a sternal rub. You cannot fake unresponsiveness. If they are not giving you any indication of life, you have some work to do. First, call 911. Put them on speakerphone if you are alone so you can answer questions while you begin CPR. Then, get the person onto the floor. This is important because you need a hard surface to give you some resistance to your compressions. Also, it allows you to be in the proper position to administer compressions correctly. Kneel beside the body. It doesn't matter which side of the person you are on. Do the sternal rub. If they are not responsive, we start compressions. Place one hand on top of the other. It does not matter which hand is on top. Lock your elbows. Place the heel of your hand in the center of the chest. This allows the power of your compressions to focus not on the ribs but on the cartilage that is holding your ribs together. It makes it a little bit easier to push. Center your shoulders over the chest and push hard at a rate of 100 compressions per minute. Get a song in your head to keep your rhythm. It is not important to count. Keep your rate steady to the beat of the song like Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. You have to push deep, at least 2 inches. We must push on the heart enough to make it move the blood through the body. Remember, we are pushing on the heart, but our goal is to keep the brain alive. This is where bystanders make the biggest mistake. We aren't pushing deep enough. Expect to hear a snap, crackle, pop with your first compressions. That is cartilage loosening and maybe ribs breaking. That's okay. We can fix the ribs. We have to keep the brain alive. Gasping is common in cardiac arrest, but gasping is not breathing. It is a natural body response while the heart is moving a natural pattern. In a cardiac arrest, the heart is not pumping blood to the brain. If you let the person lay there gasping during cardiac arrest while you wait for the emergency responders to arrive, the chance of survival is not very good. If you have done a sternal rub and the person gives you no other sign of life other than gasping, start compressions. Compressions hurt. If they don't need compressions, the person will let you know. If they aren't responding to the sternal rub and still not responding after you start compressions, there isn't blood going to the brain. Keep going through the gasping. Keep going until emergency responders arrive or until the person begins to show signs of life. How long do you do this? As long as it is safe. We don't want you to become victim number 2. If your personal safety is in danger, you don't have to help. But if you have the opportunity to help, we hope you will. If you are too tired to go on, you can stop. Compressions are physical, so it can wear you out. However, in most cases, you would only have to administer CPR for about 5 minutes. We hope you will keep going until the emergency responders arrive. And if you can share the responsibility of compressions, that's great. As we fatigue, we don't push as deep or as fast as we should. Switching off doing compressions can help you rest and come back strong at your turn.
Mr. Jones, are you okay? Are you okay?
Dr. Tyler Vetabancourt and his colleague Dr. Bentley Bobrow are using this mannequin to demonstrate an updated version of CPR called Continuous Chest Compression CPR.
The goal is to generate blood flow to the heart and the brain.
When a person collapses, there's still enough oxygen in their blood to keep them alive for about 10 minutes, but only if that blood gets to the brain. Chest compressions build up the pressure that keeps blood flowing to the heart and brain. If you stop pumping the chest for any reason, the patient's blood flow stops too. Continuous chest compression CPR keeps the oxygen-rich blood flowing.
The key is to circulate that oxygen.
The way to do that is to continuously push hard and fast on the chest,
without stopping to breathe for the patient. This makes the process easier to learn, remember, and to do. No need to count compressions or breaths, and no need for mouth-to-mouth breathing. So if you're out in public or at the office and someone collapses, dial 911.
Call 911.
Then rub their chest hard to see if they wake up. Don't waste time checking for a pulse. Start pumping.
Put one hand over the sternum, the second hand on top of it. Remember that you need to push hard, approximately 2 inches, 100 per minute. And you want to not stop until emergency medical services or the paramedics arrive.
No need to worry about hurting the person.
This person's dead. If you do nothing, they're dead. All you can do is help them.
For Medical Edge, I'm Vivian Williams.
The first step is calling 911. The second step is administering Hands Only CPR. Check for responsiveness by doing a sternal rub. No response means you start compressions, pushing at a rate of 100 compressions per minute at a depth of at least 2 inches. The third step is using an AED. AEDs are found in so many places, which really is a testament to how much they assist in cardiac events. Keep an eye out for AEDs wherever you go now. You may be surprised at where you find them. Most elementary schools have one AED, and junior high and high schools usually have 2. Anyone can use an AED. You don't have to have a certification. They've made them easy for the public to use. You should be able to pick up any AED and be able to use it even without specific training. There are pictures. The machine talks to you. And there are about 15 different languages in the instructions if you want to read them. We need to do about 2 minutes of compressions before using the AED. Remember that someone else should be getting the AED. By the time they grab the machine and set it up, you will have completed about 200 compressions. The pads need to go on a bare, dry chest. If you are just doing compressions, the shirt can stay on, but the AED pads have to go on skin, so at that point you need to remove the shirt. There are scissors in the AED packet. If the victim is a woman with a bra that has underwires, that has to be removed to prevent electrical arcing. If it is a man and he has a hairy chest, there is usually a dry razor in the packet. Shave a spot on the right shoulder and under the left rib to get a good connection with the pads. The chest must be dry because water and electricity don't mix. Do not use an AED if the victim is in a puddle of water. If the chest is moist from exercise, for instance, just use the shirt or something to dry it off before sticking the pads on the chest. The AED is going to be on the side of the body of the person who's managing the machine. Put the machine next to the patient's head. You do not want to lean over the body and push the AED buttons. By keeping it on your side, it reduces your risk of touching the body when the machine is working. Turn the machine on and follow the instructions. After you place the pads on the chest, the AED will analyze the heart rhythm. If you are touching the person at this time, the machine will pick up your heart rate and will not recommend a shock. Ensure no one is touching the patient. The AED is looking for a specific rhythm. If it finds this shockable rhythm, it will tell you that a shock is advised and will begin charging. Do not touch the patient. If you are touching the patient when the AED shocks, you will get shocked too. The AED has the power of 10 tasers. It will stop your heart. It is very important that no one touch the patient when it says it's going to shock. The machine will shock, pause, then tell you to begin CPR again if necessary. If the person is not responsive, you will begin compressions. It is completely safe to touch the patient at this time. The pads stay on, the machine stays on. The AED will time itself for 2 minutes, which means you will do about 200 compressions. It will analyze and shock if necessary every 2 minutes. Sometimes it will say that no shock is advised. This just means that the person does not have a shockable rhythm. If the person does not show signs of life, continue CPR. This is the basic placement of the pads and where you would position the AED. The AED will move from one side of the head to the other as you switch off doing compressions with the other person. This allows you time to rest before doing your compressions again. Remember, the first step is to call 911. If you are in a group of people, don't just yell out, "Call 911." Instead, point to a person and assign them to make the call. Otherwise, people may stand around hoping someone else will make the call. Check for responsiveness by doing the sternal rub. Assign someone to go find an AED and bring it back. If the person is not responsive, place one hand on top of the other and begin compressions. Push at a rate of 100 compressions per minute at a depth of at least 2 inches. When the AED arrives, continue compressions as the person works around you to remove the shirt and properly place the AED pads. Make sure the AED is next to the victim's head. Turn on the machine and listen to instructions. The person doing compressions will stop when the AED says, "Analyzing heart rhythm." Do not touch the patient. If it finds a shockable rhythm, it will charge. Ensure that no one is touching the patient. It will shock, pause, then tell you to begin CPR if the patient is not responsive. The person who last did compressions will rest. The machine is moved to the side of the body so that they can listen for the AED to give instructions. The other person will begin compressions, pushing at a rate of 100 compressions per minute at a depth of 2 inches until the AED says to stop. This process will repeat every 2 minutes. The pads stay on and the machine stays on until the firefighters arrive. Congratulations! You now have a basic understanding of hands-only CPR and how to use an automated external defibrillator. If you have any questions or would like to take an in-person class, contact Scottsdale Fire Department at 480-312-8000 or fire@scottsdaleaz.gov. Now go forth and be a hero.